Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy. Alexander Kane sat in the back corner booth of Rosie's Diner, a small 24-hour restaurant on the outskirts of Chicago that he had never visited before. It was exactly 11:47 at night, and the place was nearly empty except for a tired-looking truck driver at the counter and an elderly couple sharing a piece of pie. Alexander was worth $4.2 billion, CEO of Kane Industries, one of the largest tech companies in the world. But tonight he wore simple jeans and a plain black sweater, looking like any other customer who might wander in late at night. He had come here on purpose, following a routine he practiced twice a year. Alexander would disguise himself as an ordinary person and visit random establishments to test how service workers treated those they believed had no money or power. It was his way of finding truly good people in a world where most only showed respect to those who could benefit them. Tonight's test subject was a waitress named Claire Morrison, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes but a genuine smile that had greeted him when he walked through the door 30 minutes ago. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" Claire approached his table, her order pad in hand. Her uniform was clean but worn, and Alexander noticed her shoes were scuffed and old, the kind someone wore because they couldn't afford to replace them. "Just the check, please," Alexander said kindly. "That burger was excellent, by the way. Best I've had in months." Claire's face lit up with pride. "I'll tell Jerry in the kitchen. He'll be happy to hear that. He makes everything from scratch, even the buns." She pulled the check from her apron and placed it on the table. "Whenever you're ready, no rush." Alexander looked at the check, $15.73. He reached for his wallet, then froze, patting his pockets with growing concern. "Oh no," he muttered, making a show of checking every pocket. "I can't believe this." Claire turned back from where she'd started to walk away. "Is everything okay?" "My wallet," Alexander said, looking genuinely distressed. "I must have left it in my car." "I'm so sorry. Let me just run out and grab it." "Take your time," Claire said warmly. "I'll be here." Alexander stood and walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "Actually, I just remembered. I took an Uber here. My wallet must be back at my apartment. I live about 40 minutes away." He let the words hang in the air, watching Claire's reaction carefully. This was the test. Most service workers, when faced with a customer who couldn't pay, would call their manager, make a scene, or at minimum show irritation. Alexander had seen it dozens of times in his tests, but Claire just smiled. "Don't worry about it. These things happen." Alexander blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "I said don't worry about it." Claire pulled out her own wallet from her apron pocket. It was thin and worn, held together with duct tape on one corner. "I'll cover it. You can pay me back some other time if you want, or don't. $15 won't break me." Alexander stared at her in disbelief. "You don't have to do that. I can call someone to bring my wallet, or I can leave my phone as collateral. Your phone is probably worth more than this entire restaurant." Claire laughed. "Look, I've been where you are. A few years ago I was in a grocery store and my card got declined. I had a baby at home and no food. A stranger paid for my groceries, about $50 worth. She told me to pay it forward when I could. So I've been paying it forward ever since, little bits at a time." She pulled out a $20 bill and placed it on the table. "Besides, you seem like a good person. You were polite, you said please and thank you, and you didn't leave a mess." "That's more than I can say for most customers." Alexander felt something shift in his chest. In all his years of testing people, no one had ever offered to pay for him. Most service workers were kind but cautious. They followed protocol, but Claire was different. She was giving away money she clearly needed for a stranger she would probably never see again. "I insist on paying you back," Alexander said firmly. "I'm Alexander, by the way. Alexander Kane." He extended his hand. "Claire Morrison." She shook his hand with a warm grip. "And sure, if you want to pay me back, that's fine. But honestly, don't stress about it. I work the night shift here 4 times a week. You can catch me whenever." Alexander nodded slowly, an idea forming in his mind. "Actually, do you have a pen I could borrow?" Claire handed him one from her apron. Alexander picked up a napkin and wrote carefully, "Claire Morrison, 1573, Rosie's Diner, November 14th, 11:58 p.m. He folded the napkin and put it in his pocket. "I'll be back to repay you. I promise." "I believe you," Claire said, and the remarkable thing was, she genuinely seemed to. After Alexander left, Claire continued her shift. She served the truck driver his third cup of coffee, chatted with the elderly couple about their grandson's wedding, and cleaned tables that didn't really need cleaning. At 3:22 in the morning, her manager Bob emerged from the office. "Claire, got a minute?" Bob was a heavy-set man in his 50s who had owned Rosie's Diner for 20 years. He was fair but strict about money, and Claire immediately worried she was in trouble for paying for that customer's meal. "Sure, Bob. What's up?" Claire followed him to the office, her heart pounding. Bob sat down heavily in his chair and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "That guy you paid for tonight. The one who forgot his wallet. Did he seem strange to you?" Claire's stomach dropped. "Strange how? Did he do something wrong?" "I'm sorry, I should have checked with you before I paid for his meal, but he seemed genuine and I just—" "Claire, relax." Bob held up his hand. "You're not in trouble. I'm asking because after he left, I looked at the security camera footage. Something about him seemed familiar." Bob turned his computer monitor toward Claire. On the screen was a paused image of Alexander sitting in the booth. "Does he look familiar to you?" Claire studied the image. "No, I've never seen him before tonight. Why?" Bob pulled up something on his phone and showed it to Claire. It was a Forbes magazine article with the headline, "Alexander Kane, the billionaire who never forgot where he came from." The photo showed the same man, but in an expensive suit standing in front of a glass skyscraper. Claire's mouth fell open. "That's him. That's the guy from tonight. But this says he's a billionaire. Why would a billionaire come to our diner and pretend he forgot his wallet?" Bob leaned back in his chair. "I did some research. Apparently he's famous for these tests. He goes to random places, pretends to be broke, and sees how people treat him. There are articles about it. He's used these tests to find employees for his company, to decide which businesses to invest in, and sometimes just to restore his faith in humanity." Claire felt her face flush. "So he was testing me? I was some kind of experiment?" Bob shook his head. "I don't think it was like that. From what I read, he genuinely wants to find good people. And Claire, you paid for his meal out of your own pocket. That says something about who you are." Claire sat down, trying to process this information. "I can't believe I paid for a billionaire's burger with my tip money." Bob laughed. "Well, if the articles are right, he always pays people back. And usually a lot more than they spent on him." Claire shook her head firmly. "I don't want his money, Bob. I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Bob smiled. "I know, Claire. That's exactly why you're one of the best people I've ever met. Now get back out there. Table 6 needs a coffee refill." 3 days passed and Claire forgot about the incident. She was too busy dealing with real life. Her daughter Emma was 6 years old and had been diagnosed with a learning disability that required expensive therapy sessions. Claire's ex-husband had disappeared 2 years ago and sent no child support. She worked 2 jobs, the night shift at Rosie's Diner and morning shifts at a grocery store, sleeping only 4 or 5 hours a day. On the 4th day after meeting Alexander, Claire arrived at the diner for her shift at 10:45 at night. Bob was waiting for her at the entrance with a strange expression on his face. "Claire, someone left something for you." He handed her a small envelope with her name written on it in elegant handwriting. Claire opened it and found a black credit card inside. Not just any credit card, but an American Express Centurion card, the famous black card that only the wealthiest people in the world could obtain. There was a note attached. "Claire, I told you I'd pay you back. This card has no limit. Buy whatever you need. Consider it paying forward the kindness you showed me. Alexander Kane." Claire's hands trembled. "Bob, I can't accept this. This has to be worth millions of dollars. What if I lose it? What if someone steals it?" Bob looked as shocked as she felt. "Claire, there's more. He left a phone number. I think you should call him." With shaking fingers, Claire dialed the number on the note. Alexander answered on the second ring. "Hello, Claire. I was hoping you'd call. Mr. Kane, I can't accept this card. It's too much. I only paid $15 for your meal. And that $15 was probably money you needed for yourself or your daughter," Alexander said gently. "Yes, Claire, I know about Emma. I hope you don't mind, but I did some research. I know you work 2 jobs, that you're raising your daughter alone, that you're struggling to pay for her therapy sessions. I know you haven't bought yourself new clothes in 2 years, and that you donated your coat to a homeless woman last winter, even though it was the only warm one you had." Claire felt tears welling up in her eyes. "How do you know all that?" "I told you I research people, but I only research people who impress me. And Claire, You impressed me more than anyone has in a very long time." Alexander's voice was warm and sincere. "That card is yours. Use it however you want. Buy groceries, pay for Emma's therapy, get yourself a new coat. There's no limit and no strings attached. Mr. Kane, I can't just take money from you. It doesn't feel right." Claire wiped her eyes. "Please call me Alexander." "And you're not taking money from me. I'm investing in a good person. Do you know how rare it is to find someone who would pay for a stranger's meal with money they desperately need themselves? You didn't do it because you thought I was rich. You didn't do it for recognition. You did it because it was right." Claire was silent for a long moment. "What if I use it for something frivolous? What if I make a mistake?" Alexander laughed. "Claire, I trust your judgment more than I trust most of my board members. Use it however you see fit. The only thing I ask is that you don't refuse this gift. Let someone help you for once. You spend your whole life helping others. Let me help you." After a long pause, Claire whispered, "Thank you. I don't know what else to say except thank you." "That's enough," Alexander said. "Now go take care of your daughter. And Claire, maybe buy yourself something nice too. You deserve it." That night, after her shift ended at 6:15 in the morning, Claire didn't go straight home. Instead, she stopped at a 24-hour supermarket. For the first time in years, she didn't check prices. She bought fresh vegetables, quality meat, fruit that wasn't on sale, and Emma's favorite cereal that Claire usually couldn't afford. She bought herself a new pair of work shoes and a warm winter coat. At the checkout, when the cashier rang up the total of $347, Claire handed over the black card with trembling hands. The card worked. The transaction went through like it was nothing. Claire gathered her bags and walked to her car, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. Over the next few weeks, Claire used the card carefully and thoughtfully. She paid for 6 months of Emma's therapy sessions in advance. She fixed her car that had been making strange noises for months. She paid off her credit card debt that had been drowning her. She even donated money to the local food bank where she had once needed to take food for herself and Emma. But Claire didn't go crazy with the card. She didn't buy expensive jewelry or designer clothes. She bought practical things, necessary things, and she kept working both her jobs. One evening, 4 weeks after receiving the card, Claire was working at the diner when Alexander walked in. This time, he wasn't disguised. He wore an expensive suit and walked with the confidence of a man who owned the world. Every head in the diner turned to look at him. "Hello, Claire." Alexander smiled as he approached her station. "Could I get a table?" "Of course, Mr. Kane." Claire gestured to the same booth where he'd sat a month ago. "Your usual spot." Alexander laughed. "Perfect." He sat down and Claire handed him a menu, though they both knew he wasn't really here for the food. "How have you been?" "I've been good," Claire said honestly. "Really good, actually, thanks to you." "I saw you made a donation to the local food bank," Alexander said casually. $5,000. That's generous, Claire blushed. "You're tracking my purchases?" "I pay attention to how people use resources I give them," Alexander admitted. "It tells me a lot about their character." "And Claire, everything you've bought has been either necessary for your daughter, necessary for your work, or donated to help others. You haven't bought a single luxury item for yourself except for that coat, and even that was practical." "I don't need luxury items," Claire said simply. "I need stability. I need to know Emma will be okay. That's what your gift gave me. Not things, but peace of mind." Alexander nodded slowly, and Claire saw something in his eyes that looked like respect and perhaps something more. "Claire, I have a question for you, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." "Okay," Claire said, suddenly nervous. "What is it?" "How would you like to stop working 2 jobs and come work for me instead?" Alexander leaned forward. "I need someone to run my charitable foundation. Someone who understands what it's like to struggle, who knows how to identify people who genuinely need help versus people who just want handouts. Someone with integrity and compassion." "I think that person is you." Claire stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Kane, I'm a waitress. I don't have a college degree. I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You have something better than a degree," Alexander countered. "You have wisdom earned through hardship. You have empathy. You have integrity. Those can't be taught in any university. Everything else, the administrative skills, the financial knowledge, that can be learned." He pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "The salary is $200,000 a year, full benefits, including coverage for Emma's therapy. You'd work normal hours, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. No more night shifts, no more working yourself to exhaustion. Claire picked up the card with shaking hands. Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. I know everything I need to know, Alexander said firmly. You paid for a stranger's meal with money you needed for yourself. That tells me more about your character than any resume or interview ever could. And in the last month, you've proven that my instinct was right. You used a card with unlimited funds, and you were more responsible with it than most of my executives are with their expense accounts. Claire felt tears building again. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Alexander stood up and placed money on the table for a meal he hadn't ordered. Talk to Emma about it. Talk to Bob, but Claire, please consider it. I believe you could change a lot of lives through my foundation, the same way you changed mine. After Alexander left, Bob emerged from the kitchen where he'd been watching the whole conversation. Claire, if you don't take that job, I'm going to fire you just so you have to take it. Claire laughed through her tears. You heard all that? Everyone heard it. Bob gestured around the diner where customers and staff were all staring at her with wide smiles. Claire, this is your chance. Take it. You deserve it. That night, Claire went home and told Emma about the job offer. Her daughter's eyes went wide. Mommy, does this mean you won't have to work at night anymore? You'll be home to put me to bed? Yes, baby. Claire hugged her daughter tight. I'll be home every night. Then you should say yes, Emma said with the simple wisdom of a 6-year-old. I miss you at bedtime. The next morning, Claire called the number on Alexander's business card. He answered immediately. Claire, I was hoping to hear from you. I accept, Claire said, her voice steady and sure. When do I start? How about Monday? Alexander sounded genuinely pleased. That gives you time to give notice at your jobs and arrange childcare for Emma. We have an on-site daycare at Kane Industries, by the way. Emma is welcome to attend. It's run by certified teachers and therapists who specialize in learning disabilities. Claire had to sit down. You thought of everything. I try, Alexander said. Claire, welcome to the team. I think this is going to be the beginning of something special. He was right. Over the next 6 months, Claire transformed the Kane Foundation from a generic charity that wrote checks into a hands-on organization that truly helped people. She created programs for single mothers, for workers struggling to make ends meet, for children who needed educational support. She visited shelters, talked to families, identified real needs, and filled them. Alexander watched her work with growing admiration. Claire had a gift for seeing people, really seeing them, the same way she had seen him that night in the diner. She could tell the difference between someone who needed help and someone who wanted a handout. She was firm but compassionate, practical but kind, and slowly, without either of them really planning it, Alexander and Claire grew closer. It started with working late together, then coffee meetings that turned into lunch meetings, then dinners that weren't quite dates but felt like they could be. One evening, 8 months after Claire started working at the foundation, Alexander asked her to stay late to review a grant proposal. But when she arrived at his office at 7:32 at night, there was no proposal. Instead, there was dinner set up by the window overlooking the city, candles flickering on the table. Alexander, what is this? Claire asked, though her heart was already beating faster. This is me taking a chance, Alexander said, walking toward her. Claire, these past 8 months have been the best of my professional life, but more than that, they've been the best of my personal life. You make me want to be a better person. You remind me why I built this company in the first place, to make a difference, to help people. Alexander? Claire started, but he held up his hand. Please let me finish. I know there's a power imbalance here. I'm your boss, you work for me, and I don't want you to feel pressured. If you don't feel the same way, we'll forget I ever said anything and go back to being colleagues and friends. But Claire, I'm falling in love with you, and I needed you to know. Claire looked at him for a long moment. This billionaire who had disguised himself to test her character, who had given her a chance when she had nothing, who had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. You're not my boss, she said softly. You're my partner, in the foundation, in this work, and if you want, in life. Alexander's face broke into the most genuine smile Claire had ever seen. Is that a yes? That's a yes, Claire said. And then she was in his arms and they were kissing, and the city lights sparkled below them like fallen stars. 6 months later, Alexander proposed to Claire in Rosie's diner in the same booth where they had first met. He got down on one knee at 11:47 at night, the exact time he had sat down that first evening, and presented her with a ring that was beautiful but not ostentatious, perfect for a woman who valued meaning over expense. Claire Morrison, you paid for my $15 meal and changed my entire life. Will you let me spend the rest of my life paying you back? Claire laughed through happy tears. You already paid me back 1,000 times over. Then will you marry me because I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone? Alexander tried again. Yes, Claire said. Yes, yes, yes. Bob gave Claire away at their wedding 3 months later. Emma was the flower girl, wearing a dress she had picked out herself. The ceremony was held not in some expensive venue, but in the community center where Claire's food bank program operated, surrounded by the families they had helped together. Alexander's billionaire friends mingled with waitresses and grocery store workers, with single mothers and struggling families, and for one perfect day, none of those differences mattered. 1 year after the wedding, Claire gave birth to a son they named Robert, after Bob, who had become like a father to both of them. Emma was thrilled to have a baby brother, and Alexander discovered he loved being a father even more than he loved closing business deals. The Cain Foundation, under Claire's leadership, grew into one of the most respected charitable organizations in the country. They focused on helping working-class families, single parents, and anyone who was struggling but trying hard to make it. Every person they helped was treated with the same dignity and respect that Claire had shown Alexander that night in the diner. 5 years after that first meeting, Alexander and Claire sat in Rosie's diner at 11:47 at night, the same booth, the same time. It had become their tradition to visit once a year on the anniversary of the day they met. Do you ever regret it? Claire asked, sipping coffee. Regret what? Alexander held her hand across the table. Testing people the way you did? Coming in here pretending to be someone you're not? Alexander thought about it carefully. I regret that I felt I had to disguise myself to see people's true character. But I don't regret doing it because it led me to you. That $15 you paid was the best investment anyone ever made in me. I didn't invest in you, Claire laughed. I paid for your burger because you seemed like a nice guy who was having a bad night. Exactly, Alexander said. You saw me as a person, not as a wallet or a business opportunity. You treated me with kindness when I could offer you nothing in return. That's real character, Claire. That's real love. And I spend every day trying to be worthy of what you saw in me that night. Claire squeezed his hand. You know what the funny thing is? I knew. Knew what? Alexander looked confused. I knew something was off. Claire smiled mysteriously. You were wearing simple clothes, but your watch was a Patek Philippe. Your shoes were Italian leather, and you spoke like someone who had gone to expensive schools. I figured you were either a businessman having some kind of crisis, or you were testing me. Alexander's jaw dropped. You knew? This whole time, you knew, and you never said anything. I didn't know for sure, Claire admitted. But I suspected. And I paid for your meal anyway, because it didn't matter who you were or why you were there. You needed help in that moment, and I could provide it. That's all that mattered. Alexander stared at his wife in amazement. You continue to surprise me. Good, Claire grinned. Someone has to keep you humble. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the late-night customers come and go. A young woman in a waitress uniform, new and nervous on her first day, served a table of rowdy college students with patience and grace. Claire caught Alexander watching her. Thinking of testing another waitress? She teased. No, Alexander said firmly. I already found the best one, but I am thinking of leaving her a very generous tip. That's my husband, Claire said with pride. They left the diner at 12:32 in the morning. As they walked to their car, Alexander paused and looked back at the small restaurant with its flickering neon sign. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? Claire followed his gaze. For showing me that the richest thing in life isn't money or success or power. It's finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and loves you anyway. You saw through my disguise to the person underneath, and you treated that person with kindness. That's a gift I can never fully repay. You already did. Claire leaned her head on his shoulder.
You gave me everything I needed, stability for Emma, meaningful work, and a family.
But most of all, you gave me the same thing I gave you that night. What's that? Respect, Claire said simply. You treated me like an equal from the very beginning. You didn't act like you were rescuing me or saving me. You acted like we were partners. That's worth more than any black card or job offer. That's worth everything. They drove home together through the quiet Chicago streets, back to their house where Emma and Robert were sleeping peacefully, watched over by a nanny who Claire had personally selected and who was paid well above market rate because Claire believed everyone deserved fair compensation. 10 years after that first night in Rosie's diner, Alexander Kane gave an interview to Forbes magazine. The reporter asked him what he considered his greatest accomplishment. "My company has created 50,000 jobs," the reporter suggested. "Your net worth has grown to $12 billion. You've revolutionized 3 different industries. Surely one of those is your greatest accomplishment." Alexander shook his head. "My greatest accomplishment was having the wisdom to recognize real value when I saw it. 10 years ago, I walked into a diner and met a waitress who paid for my meal with money she couldn't afford to spend. I could have thanked her and walked away. Instead, I chose to see what she really was. Not a waitress, but one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met." "You're talking about your wife," the reporter said. "I'm talking about my partner in every sense of the word," Alexander corrected. "Claire runs the Kane Foundation, which has helped over 200,000 families in the last decade. She's raised 2 incredible children. She's made me a better person, a better businessman, and a better human being. That's my greatest accomplishment, recognizing her value and having the good sense to never let her go." The article ran with a photo of Alexander and Claire at the foundation's office, surrounded by some of the families they had helped. Claire was wearing simple clothes and practical shoes, still the same woman who preferred meaning over expense. But she was smiling, truly happy, living a life beyond anything she had imagined that night when she paid for a stranger's burger. Bob retired from Rosie's diner at 72, and Alexander and Claire bought the diner to keep it from closing. They hired Bob as a consultant and kept everything exactly the same: the worn booths, the checkered floor, the neon sign that flickered. They kept it as a reminder that extraordinary things could happen in ordinary places, that real character showed itself in small moments, and that sometimes the most valuable people in the world were the ones society overlooked. Rosie's Diner became famous as the place where a billionaire met his wife, and people traveled from across the country to eat there. But the prices stayed low, the portions stayed large, and every single waitress who worked there was paid $15 an hour above minimum wage, with full benefits and respect. Emma grew up and went to college to study social work, inspired by her mother's example. Robert decided he wanted to be a teacher, wanting to help kids the way his mother had been helped. And Alexander Kane, the billionaire who had tested a waitress with a black card, learned that the real test hadn't been about Claire at all. It had been about him, about whether he had the wisdom to recognize true value, the courage to trust someone from a different world, and the humility to learn from someone society considered beneath him. He had passed that test, not because he was smart or rich or powerful, but because Claire Morrison had taught him the most important lesson of all. That character isn't determined by wealth or status, but by the choices we make when no one is watching, when there's nothing to gain, when kindness costs us something we can't afford to lose. And that lesson, Alexander would say in his later years, was worth more than his entire $12 billion fortune. Because it led him to a life of real meaning, real love, and real purpose. All because a waitress paid for his $15 meal, and in doing so, changed both their lives forever. What did you think of Claire and Alexander's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. And check out more inspiring stories by clicking right here on the screen.